Great. Okay, so thank you all for coming. You are here for human-centered design for digital services. My name's Arielle Tye, and I'm head of development at a charity and social enterprise in Wales called Promo-cymru. And we work to ensure young people and communities are informed, engaged, connected, and heard. For the past 20 years, we've been working a lot with digital technology and using it to deliver our services. So making sure that we can better reach people, better engage people, and actually deliver services that meet people's needs. Through delivering our own services, we've been able to actually offer this expertise to other services too. So a lot of my work now is around working with organizations, both in the third sector and public sector, to support them to transition to digital working. But this talk is actually called human-centered. And actually that's the bit about digital that I really like, because actually I'm not a really techie person, but I am a real people person. And human-centered design is really about that. This event, I'm hoping, is going to help. I'm going to be going through what the design process is that I'm talking about, what is human-centered design, but also really speaking to you all, because we're in a very unique position being in the third sector, because we already engage with people day in, day out. We deliver services that meet people's needs, and terms like being person-led and human-centered is not new to us. This is what we're trying to aim to achieve. So I really hope that this approach will inspire you, like it inspired me, to actually be able to design services that actually digital services where people sit completely at the center. So, okay. So what am I going to be going through today? So really, what is human-centered design and why is it so important? Human-centered design in action. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples of projects where we've put it into practice to hopefully give you a feel for it. And also I'm going to share some tools as well. So some things that maybe you can pick up and start trying within your work with communities. But I want to start by saying, what do I even mean by digital services? I've got this really good quote that somebody said at a session that I was delivering a few years back. And at the end they said, "Oh, I thought this was going to be really techie. I'm so glad that it wasn't." So I'm hopefully today I'm going to really try and keep it not that techie, because as I said, it really is about people. And when I talk about digital services, actually, I'm using the wrong phrase really, because I don't mean the service has to be entirely digital. It's actually just about enabling services through the use of digital. Most things we access now are both digital and non-digital. So I don't mean it has to be a completely digital service. And also the reason I've put this lovely lady here with a VR headset on is because actually we can get a little bit overexcited about flashy tech. We might want new apps, we might want to use VR, but actually really it's about creating accessible services. So using technology and that's built around the people that use our services, and trying not to get too carried away with wanting to just develop something or jump on the back of something because it seems to be popular. So I used to say this, like before 2020, that we really need to start rethinking how we do things. We say this a lot at Promo-cymru. We need to get our services adopting these new approaches, because this is just how we access the world now. And like I said, it's not an either or. But I think this statement now, we've all managed to really understand in this last year that absolutely it isn't a choice anymore, that we need to be able to rethink how we can deliver our services so that they're actually relevant for people today. So I want you to just take a second to think of a service that you use that's brilliant, a service that you love, that really helps you in your life. It doesn't have to be digital, but I just want you to think for a second about that service and think about sort of why it's good. While you do that, I'm going to run through a service that I've used that I find incredibly intuitive. it's Uber. And actually, sometimes I want to put a caveat here because I'm definitely not promoting them as an organization. Please use your local taxi firms, but I'm going to use them as an example here to talk about how they've completely reimagined how a taxi service will work. So for those of you in rural areas, because I know some of you are, you might not have used Uber before. And what it is, it's a taxi. It's just ordering a taxi. But what you do is you get an app and you go on the app. And once you're on there, you can actually see all the different taxis in your area. And it'll tell you exactly how far away they are from you. So you know that your taxi is going to arrive within 2 minutes or 5 minutes. It also tells you the cost there and then of how much it's going to cost you to get to your destination. You then click to order it. And this is the incredible part. It actually shows you a map of the Uber and it shows it coming through the streets, driving to your house. So it completely takes away that thing of where's the taxi? I'm still waiting here, ringing back the taxi company. Is my taxi coming? They've alleviated all of that. And this taxi drives all the way to your house. It also tells you the number plate of the taxi and you can even contact the driver. And again, that's quite good for safety where you know exactly what taxi it is and who you're expecting to arrive. What's really interesting about this example and why I like to use it is that a taxi is not a digital service. So a taxi itself has been around way before digital. It's getting you in a car from A to B. But what they've done is they've used this tech around it to make that experience so much better for you, and it completely meets your needs. So it'd be really great in chat if you could share some of your services that you've been thinking of. What services are great for you? And maybe as they start to come through, I'll carry on, but maybe as they start to come through, my colleague might read a couple of those out about services that you use that you think are brilliant. I really like this definition of digital. So this comes from CAST, and they are the Centre for Accelerated Social Technology. If you haven't heard of them, I completely recommend that you take a look at their website and the different things that they offer. And they talk about digital being applying the culture and technologies of the internet era to make our organizations more resilient and responsive to the changing expectations, needs, and behaviors of the people that we support. And so service design, or as my talk is called, human-centered design, I've put it in brackets there because it's much of the same thing. You might have heard terms like service design, you might have heard of user-centered design, and it's all really this similar theory and similar principles. And I've taken this definition here from the Gov.uk website, and it says, the objective is to develop services that are useful, usable, and valuable from the point of view of the user, and effective from the perspective of the service provider. I've pulled it from the gov.uk really as an example to show how widely these approaches are now being used. So service design and design thinking came from big tech companies in the Silicon Valley, where they were designing all sorts of products and services that we use today. And this is being now adopted. These approaches for designing services are being adopted now by governments, by NGOs, and all across the world, because they really can help us to solve some of the world's most complex problems. I think we all know that we are in a crisis with the environment. We're suffering hugely with mental health, stress, all these different things. We're right in the middle, well, we're coming out of a pandemic. And actually design and design thinking can really help us to, as an approach to tackle some of these challenges and create solutions that work. So where would you use a service design process, which I will be showing you in a bit. Very often, it's when you have a challenge or a problem that you'd like to address. So there might be a very specific thing that's happening. For example, you've got a service which is open for men and women, but it seems to be only attracting women. So you might start your design process with thinking, how do we encourage men to use our service? Or Why are so many people missing their first legal appointments and others are turning up with the wrong documents? So this is actually a real case study, and it was called an organization called the Law Centers Network, and they give free legal advice to people who are on low income. But many people were actually missing their first appointments and others were turning up with the wrong documents. So they used a design challenge, starting off with this challenge, and I'll talk more about that later. When you're launching a new service, this is a brilliant methodology to use. So I spoke to somebody recently who said, we're buying an electric car for the village, but actually, how do we run this service? So if you think about that, there are so many elements to buying an electric car that other people in the village can book and can use. There's so many different sort of things to consider, that actually using this step-by-step approach is a really good way to help you think through how you're going to set that service up, or something like we're setting up a helpline. And my favorite sort of place, and the place that I use it most when I'm working with organizations, is actually to improve your current service. So it's a good way of stepping back and looking at your entire service from a person's perspective. So how do they navigate your service from start to finish? And what actually happens along that journey? So how do they find out about you? How do they access the support they need? And actually, where are those problem areas for them? And how can you create a better pathway? So I'm going to show you perhaps a not so good process, although this is used a lot. And I'd like you to have a look at it and maybe put in chat what's wrong with this process, do you think? So I'll give you a couple of seconds to have a look and to put something in chat, and hopefully my colleague can let me know if any messages are coming through.
We've got some examples, Arielle, of some services. For example, Ellie mentioned Uber. You know what we were Vi, the Vi app. We were talking, when we were talking earlier about services that people like. Sarah has mentioned Nextbike. It's an app where you can find out where bikes are located for rental purposes and things. Grace has mentioned Trainline. Emma has mentioned Yoelo. And Bethan has mentioned Depop.
Great.
A clothes selling app.
Thank you. And I think that's the thing. What's similar about these services is they all solve a problem for us, or they meet a need for us and make things really easy to do. So they're really great examples. And in terms of this process, I'll just give people a little bit of time to think, but let me know, Dean, if anything's come through. I'll sort of read you through the process. So this is sometimes what happens. So we need to develop a service to support young people's mental health. So that may be where we start. And then the staff get together and they start to have a think and a brainstorm, and somebody says, I think we need an app. Young people are using these, and this could be a really good way to reach lots of young people. And then they speak to young people. So we go out and we speak to some young people, and we might ask, what do you think a service should look like? And actually, you find out from that young people do agree that an app is something they would really like to use, somewhere that they could reach out for support when they need it. And then off the back of that, it's a great idea. The young people told us that we want it, and then we might invest and launch the new service. And it would be good to see if you can spot any points in this where there's perhaps a slight problem with this process. Dean, I don't know if anything's coming through or whether I'll go through it.
Karis has mentioned Splitwise as well, another app a little bit earlier there. As well, and Emma noticed that the service that Emma mentioned earlier was developed by the staff without working with young people to identify what they would find most useful.
Was that for this question? Sorry, Dean, I didn't catch that.
Sorry, Emma, was it for this question, Emma, or was you relating back to Yoelo, the service you mentioned? Oh, that was for the question. Emma,
Great.
Emma
Can you read that answer out again, please, Dean?
Yeah. Emma noted the service was developed by the staff without working with young people to identify what they would find most useful.
Great. Absolutely. I mean, it came from the staff, but they did then go and consult with young people. But some of the issues with this, where service design can really help, are so where they ask young people, and this happens a lot. So I do a lot of youth work, and I think I used to do this as well, is that we ask young people, maybe, what do you think a service should look like? And actually, that's such a big question to ask somebody, because a lot of the services that we access and that we use, we didn't come up with the concept of that service necessarily. We understand why it's good, why it's not good, but actually trying to get us to sort of imagine and think of that service from the beginning is actually very challenging. So in design, we actually don't ask for ideas until later on. And the first thing we do when we speak to people is we ask them for their needs. So we ask them what it feels like to them. We ask them what things trigger their mental health. We ask them what things have helped in the past. We ask them things like, if there was one thing that could help you to change your situation or help you to deal with your mental health, what would that be? So what we're trying to really ask and understand is, in that very first phase, is actually really understanding needs. What are people's needs? And later on, we start to see where the solutions that we come up with can fit their needs. Another issue with this is that once they've decided on the idea and they've said that it's been backed up by young people, they actually then go away and they develop it. And they heavily invest in this new service. And actually what we can't see here at any point, and I'm starting to, see when you're reading it, you're thinking, what if it doesn't work? What if the app is not the right answer? And actually you've then gone invested in it. So off the back of, sorry, carry on.
Oh, sorry, Arielle.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just thinking on that point. Ellie mentioned that they jumped straight into a solution without fully understanding the challenge. So they were listening out for what they already thought. Ellie's mentioned.
This is absolutely right. So I already know that none of you use this process, which is great. So this was something I was talking there about, sort of asking those right questions early on. That very first phase, when you've got a problem, you've really got to be like a detective, and it's called discovery. And you're really trying to understand the challenge, really dig into it. So how is your mental health? When is it at its worst? What triggers it? What really helps and what doesn't? What services have you used that did help? Why did they help? Etc., etc. And this, by speaking to people on this level, will just give you so many insights and a real deep understanding of what people need and what the challenges are that they're facing. So that leads us on nicely to the design process. This is called the Double Diamond, and this was created by the Design Council, and my colleague will share a link to more information about this in the chat. But there are different processes in service design or design thinking, but actually they do always tend to follow this sort of approach. So here you're starting off with a problem. So you have a challenge. So for example, the one I was speaking about earlier, about people are missing their first appointments at the law network and they're turning up with the wrong documents. So that's the problem. Instead of thinking, okay, well, how can we solve that? We'll jump to a solution. What actually they're going to do is they're going to go through now this design process. And as you can see in Discover, the diamond opens up. So you're going from a problem and you're really opening it up now. So you really need to delve deeply into what that challenge is. So when they spoke to people, they actually started to gather that most people were just simply forgetting. The biggest concern was that people were booking, say 3 months, there was a big waiting list, and actually they simply forgot about their appointment. Previous to this, the staff were creating all of these different assumptions about why people might be missing their appointments. Like, for example, they didn't necessarily have the bus fare to get there, or perhaps because the appointment was free, people weren't really valuing that time. But actually, it could be something really simple. So then once they've understood the problem better, you start to define. And so this is where you're really pinning it onto a focus area that you're going to solve. And in this case, how might we help people to remember their appointment time? How might we make that part of the journey easier for them? And only then, when you have that sort of real understanding that people are missing their appointments because they simply forget, so how might we help them to remember their appointment time, then you've got a sort of catalyst, a question to start developing those solutions. So this is where the fun bit, this is where you can actually, again, with service users, start actually brainstorming and developing ideas around that particular question. But really importantly, in this stage in develop, we prototype and we test. So again, we don't actually deliver here. We do not develop services. We create small things that we can test before we move on to actually scale up the service and deliver. And you actually can't move on to deliver until you've got a working prototype, we call it. So you've tried out your solution and you've started to see some positive results. And as you can see, we've got that second part of the diamond. So we defined in to the middle, and then we opened it up again to try and think of lots of possibilities and solutions before we narrowed it down into deliver. This is another diagram of the process. Recently, we were doing work with youth workers. We've been working on a project across Europe, trying to bring design thinking or human-centered design into youth work. And actually, some people that we were working with found the double diamond, I don't know, a bit inaccessible for them. And so we redeveloped with youth workers this new process, it's the same process, but visually different. So as you can see here in Discover, you've got sort of all these different shapes and sizes, all these different people you're speaking to, things that you're looking at. Then you look more closely and define with your magnifying glass. And then, as you can see, you start to develop these prototypes. So we're developing like 4 potential solutions. And then you move one of those prototypes, because it worked, into the final phase, which they renamed Do It, because they felt like it was quite a more motivating than deliver. And then once you're in that phase, you start the continuous improvement of that service. So what they really wanted to highlight as well is that it doesn't end once you get to the end of the process. Actually, you then end up in this continuous improvement where you're constantly iterating and improving your service. So take a look at this photo for a minute. I just want you to take this in. So often very well-intentioned ideas, because they are not thought through how people actually behave, how we actually use the world, they unfortunately can end up like this. So this was a calming measure to stop cyclists flying down the cycle path. And actually what happens is we just go around the edge, because how people behave, you know, we tend to just go towards our behavior, even if we think we're not going to do that. So there's a great phrase that I use a lot, that I heard, that I'd like to pass on to you, which is what people say they do and what they actually do are 2 different things. So what we say we do and what we actually do are 2 different things. So again, service design or human-centered design helps us to actually really understand how somebody is going to use something, how we actually behave. If you think about gym memberships, so everybody in January signs up to the gym, the whole of the model, the business model of the gym is built on the fact that what people say they're going to do and what they actually do are 2 different things. Because if everybody who had a membership actually turned up to the gym would be too busy and nobody would be able to get in. But they know that actually we've got the best intentions and we sign up, but actually a lot of us really truly are probably not going to make it that often. So this is a great illustration of how we sort of build and iterate digital services. In fact, I think it's really useful for any services. So this illustration, and I will walk you through it, is about a problem of how do we get to A to B faster than walking. So if you imagine before cars, before bikes, imagine someone thinking, right, how do I get from A to B quicker than walking? So the first example at the top They start off with a wheel, and then they sort of add 2 wheels, and then they add on a body, and then it becomes a car. And actually all the way along, he's not been very happy, this person, because at no point until the very end could they get from A to B quicker than walking. So actually this is not how things are designed. It doesn't just go from a wheel and then a couple of idea changes to being a car. And actually what's more realistic is that the first thing you do to get from A to B quicker than walking is put a board on a couple of wheels. And actually what's brilliant about this is, does it get you there quicker than walking? The answer is yes. So very quickly they have this small prototype car, because actually it's working. By putting wheels on something, it's working. But he's not very happy because actually he keeps falling off and hurting his elbows. So the next thing he decides to do is put on a handlebars. And by putting on a handlebars, actually, it's a lot less wobbly. Then that goes onto a bike, feeling much more happy now. Then they put an engine on it, you have a motorbike, and eventually we have a car. But what this really demonstrates about constant iteration is that first idea still needs to work. That concept still needs to work. And then from there you build. So one of the great questions to ask yourself, and this came from CAST. So I attended and also helped deliver these design hops for CAST, who I was speaking about earlier. And one of the questions they ask you to think about when you're designing things is, what is my skateboard? So it's not the app, it's not the end thing, that might be the idea. What's your skateboard? What's the smallest possible thing you can do to test out your idea to see if it works? Okay, tiny bit of a break for you because I've been talking a lot. So again, I would really like you to write in chat. It's a little bit of a sort of an activity here. So why do people choose the escalator over the stairs? So as you can see in this image, we've got loads of people using the escalator, but nobody's using the stairs. So why is that? And I'm going to give you a second. Please think of as many ideas as possible as to why they're using the escalator over the stairs. And Dean, it would be great if you could read some of these out. I'll give you a second.
Yeah, we've got answers, Arielle, because we're lazy, accessibility, people believe it will be faster, or at least less work, less effort, because it is easier, less energy, requires less effort. Everybody else's, Sarah noted. It's easier if you're carrying something heavy, from David. Karis mentioned there because everyone else is. Hallie is more novel. Tanya, it's more fun than walking up the stairs. It's a quicker option, from Ajana. You get to the escalator before the stairs, Emma noted. That's
great. Thank you so much for your answers. That's Brill. I'm now going to show you a video and then we'll chat again about what we thought after this. Let me know if you can't hear anything and I'll reshare. Oh, let me just move on. Great. So I hope you enjoyed that short break watching a video there. I just really like it because a lot of the, these assumptions that we make, like maybe people are in a rush, all these different things. And I think it, it shows you that solutions can be really creative, and actually we can change our, change our sort of behavior based on that as well. So these really creative solutions. And clearly, we might assume people are in a rush, but obviously they weren't rushing that much, because when it was fun to play on the stairs, we had lots more people actually using the stairs, which I think is pretty cool. So one of the really good things to think about right at the beginning of a project is, what do we know? What do we think we know? And what don't we know? So question our assumptions. As professionals, we've been working in our fields for a long time, and we build up so many assumptions. And right at the beginning, it's really good to think about these through questions, because the things that we think we know, we need to check out, and the things that we don't know, we need to learn. So now I'm going to, for the last part of the session, just go through a couple of case studies. So I've gone through some of the design principles and some of the process, but I'm going to show you some case studies in action. And hopefully, if we've got time at the end, I will open up to some questions as well. So I worked on a project a few years ago. We got some funding through Nesta, an Innovate to Save program, and we partnered up with Public Health Wales, because we wanted to look at how could we make sexual health information more accessible. We wanted to think about, what really would the perfect sexual health service look like for a young person. It was young people we're working with. Some of the issues that we were presented with initially was that, STI rates are quite high. There's quite a high risk amongst young people. And information on sexual health isn't really very accessible. These were the things that we sort of thought that we knew, that we came into. And actually, when I first started this project, I was really imagining that we might just be recreating information pages, making them more visually appealing, making them easier to find, this sort of thing. But actually, through doing the design process, our project turned out very differently to what I first imagined. So what we did, we really needed to understand how young people behaved in a given situation. So rather than just asking them what would happen if they thought they had an STI, we actually gave them a storyboard scenario. So I went into a school and different colleges, and we just gave a really simple storyboard. And in the first frame, I gave them a scenario, and I said, so I had unprotected sex, so this is them, on Saturday night. Now I've heard that person that I slept with may have chlamydia. Oh no, I'm so worried. What do I do? So we came into the school and we said, right, this is happening to you today. What are you going to do about it? And so we asked them to map every step that they would take. So like, I look on my phone, I find this. What was really interesting is they would search on their phones for a number of different things. Most of them would actually end up on the NHS website. So they would end up in the place that they need to be. And they were able to get through the information, and they were even able to find their local clinics and some of the opening times. But what was really interesting is every single young person that did this exercise, when we asked them, and it was quite a clue, because we put chlamydia into our example, and we did that for a reason, because actually with chlamydia, it takes 2 weeks for it to actually show up in your system on a test. So if you're concerned that something happened to you on Saturday night and that was the only exposure you think you've had, you need to wait 2 weeks before you go to get a test. And they actually said this quite clearly on the NHS website, and every single young person that we spoke to managed to somehow miss that or misinterpret that information, and they all went to the clinic this in their imaginary journey. It's in the quickest point as possible, so they would all go that same week. So we noticed that even though information was there, they actually weren't processing information in the right way. So we wanted to then change our project to look at how might we help young people to better process and digest all of this information so that they are actually being able to make that informed choice. One of the tools that we used, and this is a great tool for you to use, is to then map out the journey that they're going through. So ask somebody, like we did, what is it like to move through this service, and try and map out what's happening for them. And you can use smiley faces, because actually you can see them when it's terrible, when it's a horrible part of the journey, and then when it's good. So this young person here is very sad because they're worried that they might have chlamydia. They search online and they feel overwhelmed by all of this confusing information. They find a clinic, so now they're feeling quite good, but they're actually really frustrated because they can't book an appointment. Actually, a lot of our sexual health services, you need to just turn up and wait in a long queue. I mean, this was at the time. I imagine you can now book, but this was a couple of years ago. You had to actually join a queue, feel really insecure, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, by the time this person eventually got to the front of the queue and they saw a health worker, they were turned away because they'd come at the wrong time. So you can see how terrible that journey could be. And then what we did was we had to flip that round and think about, okay, so what would a perfect journey look like? And it doesn't mean we might be able to achieve all these things within the scope of this project, but how can we actually make this better? So wouldn't it be great that when a young person was worried, they search online and then they find a youth-friendly website full of information that's relevant to them? What if they could also chat to an advisor immediately, or go on some sort of tool that helps them to get to the exact information that they need? Then once they've booked in an appointment, I mean, it would be great, wouldn't it, if they could book it there and then, which is again how we expect to access services today. If you could book directly. And then after that, what the young people told us was that they really would love to have some other information, because they're a bit worried before they go about things like, what's going to happen at the clinic? What are they going to ask me? What are they going to do? Like, do I have to get naked? All of these things. And so you can alleviate all of this by providing the right information at those right key times for a young person. So what we ended up doing was actually rethinking how we present information to young people. And so instead of them having to digest all of this information, find out which bit they need, what we did was we created a tool, an online tool using Typeform, which is a platform, like a sort of a logic platform. So it's a bit like a survey, but it's got logic to it. So depending on what you answer, it takes you to a different outcome. And what you do is you just go on there, you type in your age, you type in what type of sex you had, and it asks you a number of questions. And at the end, it tells you exactly what you need to do and where you need to go. And it also links you to your local clinic. Now, this was just the beginning of it, because as you can imagine, after this, they want to be able to actually book directly, and they also would like to be sent then information via video format on what's going to happen at the clinic. So we created a whole set of different videos about what's going to happen, about what the tests are like, again, to just really support a young person with all of the information that they need and to alleviate some of that worry. So really, it's about creating accessible services. So again, thinking right back to the beginning of my presentation when I said, let's not get overexcited with flashy tech. Let's just focus on making something easy to find, easy to use, easy to contact, and easy to feed back as well. We haven't got loads of time left, but I want to show you this very last example. Because I think it's an approach that can be used across lots of different things. So last year, I worked with a big national charity, well, promo-cymru, we worked with them, called Catch-22. And the project we worked on was they were working with young people who had been either sexually exploited or exploited in some way. So when they worked with a young person had already been involved with the police or the social services. And then it'd been identified that exploitation had happened, and then they would need to be sent to Catch-22 to actually go on some sort of intervention. So the caseworker would then get in touch with a young person, and then they would maybe spend 10 weeks or so going through a program to really support that young person. But when Catch-22 didn't really work digitally at all, and then the pandemic hit, and they really felt that, I mean, the young people were in just as bad, vulnerable situations, if not worse, but actually they didn't feel that they could actually connect with them well digitally. So they asked us to come and help them to think through what tools that they could use. There was a whole number of recommendations we came out with, but this one I would like to show you was one particular problem. So when we spoke to the young people doing our user research, we found out that young people, before that first appointment, before the meeting with the caseworker, they were feeling really anxious. They've just spoke to the police, they've just spoke to social services, they've just had to tell their parents and find out that they might have not even been aware that this exploitation was happening to them. And they are feeling, as you can imagine, very confused, very anxious. And they were completely unclear then about who Catch-22 were. And they were worried about this upcoming appointment with Catch-22, which would often mean that they didn't turn up. So we started to think about, okay, so how might we alleviate some of that anxiety prior to their first appointment? And I'm going to show you a tool that we started to use, that an example of how they could actually contact a young person digitally before they even meet with them. So this is called Video Ask. And so what you would do as a caseworker, this is very easy to use. You are matched with somebody. So I'm matched with a young person called Gareth, for example. And what I would do is I would send them a video of me asking them some questions before we even start the appointment. I'm just going to play you this so you can see how it works. This was just a prototype.
Hi James, I'm Matt. Nice to meet you. I'm a caseworker from Catch-22. Thanks a lot for agreeing to meet me. I wanted to send you this message to let you know a little bit more about Catch-22, who I am, what we might cover in our chat, and to find out a little bit more from you about how you'd like to meet me, whether that's text, phone call, video chat, and find out anything more about the questions you might have about meeting me. So you can respond to this message either using short videos, audio, or with text. It's all here and you can click on it. All are fine. And if you'd rather not respond at all, that's also totally cool. So as well as working for Catch-22, I can tell you a little bit more about me. I love tennis. I waste far too much time laughing at videos on YouTube. And if I had a superpower, it would probably be sleeping. Nothing gets me out of bed on Saturday mornings. Nothing. I also love music and Spotify. So I've made a playlist that I've made. I wanted to share it with you. If you're on Spotify, you can listen to it. I'll link to it afterwards. Okay, so enough about me, down to business. So I can call you on the phone next week. I can text you. I can WhatsApp you. Or if you have Signal, I could message you there. Which one would work for you?
So that would be what the young person gets, and then they get to select an answer. So I'd prefer a text message.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, James. So that's it for me. I'm interested to know, what would you like to cover in our chat?
So they can type in an answer.
That's great. Thanks again, James. And is there anything that you'd like to do when we talk, like play a game or listen to music? And if so, what kind of music? Thanks, James. Is there anything else that you'd like to share or ask me before we chat? Thank you, James. I'll come back to you on anything that you've suggested or asked me. So I'm really looking forward to meeting next week. Just to leave you with something, I wanted to send you a link to a free song download and a pack of emoji. So you'll get those in a link after this message. I hope you like them, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you. Cheers.
So I hope you can see how that creates a completely different experience for a young person before they access a service. So that was just one of the tools that we introduced to really help that journey improve for a young person. And there was a number of other things that were used throughout the other parts of the journey as well. Oh, Sorry, I'm just playing it again. All right. Okay, so there are a number of different tools that you can use. Some of them I've gone through today to really help you to stay human-centered. So interviews, you know, those conversations, but really focusing on needs. So trying to get solutions out of it from the first, at first. Journey mapping, what's really happening, get a really great idea of, from that person's point of view, how they walk through your service. Storyboards, trying to work out how people actually behave and what's going on. Personas is another great tool. I didn't talk about those today, but actually creating personas of your different service users, you know, because actually a service is very different to Kyle, who's 16, or Sandra, who's 53. So you can use those as well. And of course, prototyping. So there's not enough time today to go through many prototyping tools. But the one thing that I suppose the message that I would like you to go away with is thinking about, what's your skateboard? What's the smallest possible thing you could do to test out your idea, to get the results, to get those results that you need to know that you can then build from there. The reason that design is so important, human-centered design process, is because if we use these approaches, we can deliver positive social environmental impact through the application of digital technologies. We can provide services that better meet people's needs and work today, and make better decisions about technology so that we can invest properly. There are a couple of things that I'd like to leave you with, and my colleague's going to put them in chat. So if there's some resources, we have a whole online resource bank at promo-cymru. I want to point you in the direction of the Catalyst, where you can also find lots of resources and service recipes. So they are people who've already perhaps gone through the same problem that you're dealing with, and they write up exactly what they did so you can learn from others. And also another good one is the charity catalogue. So this is full of loads of different tools and things that, again, charities have used and how they've used it. And please do stay in touch. Please sign up to our mailing list. I'm